Welcome back, traders. In this video, we're going to be going over support and resistance. Support and resistance is so important when it comes to drawing your zones and knowing when to buy or sell based off of how price is reacting off of your zones. And don't forget the concepts that we learned up until now, okay? So, making sure you're looking at breaks of structure at your zones or non-breaks of structure, so rejections. Also paying attention to highs and lows. How are we forming structure? Are we creating lower lows and lower highs? Don't forget the concept that you learned before because everything will always go hand in hand and will always go together, right? The concept of support and resistance comes from the saying buy low, sell high, okay? And this should make sense if you think about what a ceiling and a floor actually is. Buy low and sell high. All right, beautiful. Okay, so resistance is going to be a ceiling, guys. So think about it when you're in your house, you look up, you have a ceiling. And isn't that higher than your floor? The very floor that you stand on, the very floor you walk, at 3 o'clock in the morning to get a snack when you know you shouldn't be getting a snack and you should be sleeping? Yes. Okay. So floor is going to be called your support because it is supporting you. Every time you walk, you are being supported by a floor, a ground, okay? And your resistance is always going to be higher because that is your ceiling. That is up above you. And this is why we are going to try and buy at support and sell at resistance, aka buy low and sell high. Because if you really actually think about it, would it make sense to buy at the ceiling or the floor? And in other words, would I rather buy when the price is higher or when the price is lower? I would rather get into the market when the price is lower so I can make the most amount of money. And I don't like being picky when it comes to drawing zones, but I want you guys to understand how you can draw them in the form of when price is moving bullishly, like really nicely, and when price is just creating different types of structure, right? Okay, so that being said, guys, if I wanted to draw my structure for buys or my resistance and my support, guys, this is what I would be thinking about for buys, okay? So for buys, I would be thinking about drawing my supports at anywhere where, price is at its lowest. So these are going to be higher lows, right? Because realistically, I want to try and buy when price creates higher lows, right? I want to buy here. I want to buy here. I would rather buy at these lows than buy at these highs because these are higher. These are like ceilings in the case. These are basically ceilings, right? So I don't want to buy at a ceiling. I don't want to buy at a higher price. I want to try and buy when price is lower. So our goal as traders is to anticipate where price is going to create higher lows so we can get in at those points in the market. So we are what? Essentially buying low and selling high. All right. So this is a low. So we want to get in at any of these points here to ride price up, right? So these are going to be great support zones. And sometimes, like I said, you might see these previous highs here being tested to create a higher low, right? So if that is the case, these are good points in the market where we as traders want to be on the lookout for because these are great areas to do what? Get in for buys, right? Price tested here, right? We're hoping to price creates a higher low to continue pushing up, right? Price retraces testing a previous high or whatever. We're hoping price creates a higher low to continue pushing up. And that is the goal when it comes to buys. Whereas sells the same thing. We want to get in where price is what? At the highest point. I would rather sell at a higher point in the market than sell at a lower point because I want to make the most amount of money. And so these points here, these lower highs, these are going to be really great entry points or great areas where we want to get into the market. And these highs can also be these highs can also be considered as our resistance, right? Our resistance because highs will always be resistance, right? We all highs will always be some type of resistance. Okay? Because we are failing to break we're failing to go higher, right? And that is what causes price to create a lower high. And just like buys, price loves to test these lows in a bearish market to create lower highs. And these are great points that we want to pay attention to in order to, potentially get in on the lower high so we can get in at a good price point. Okay? So this is going to be a lower high. This is going to be a lower high, right? And then we have these lows being broken. So this is allowing us to basically say, all right, price wants to continue pushing down. Okay. So overall, we want to buy low and sell high. Okay. So that being said, guys, I want to show you guys an example from a standpoint of a support and a resistance like this. Okay. Because I want you guys to understand that support can become resistance and vice versa. This is a support. Remember, for support, these are where lows are usually going to be created. Why? Because we just established that support is a floor. It's low. It's lower than the ceiling. So these are going to be considered where lows are at, okay? So let's just say we're continuing, we're pushing up. Okay, we're creating some type of structure. We're creating structure, push up again, push up, push up, push up again. We find some type of resistance here, okay? Yep, we're just creating some resistance, and then we finally come back down here, and then we come back down here, and maybe we come like this, okay? So guys, every time you see price break structure, of these previous highs, do you guys notice how we come back down here? So this was originally a support, and this was originally a resistance. Resistance will usually be highs because it's above, it's high, it's higher, right? And when we broke this, guys, do you guys notice how we came back and tested it? So what was once resistance then became support. Because remember, we buy at support. So we held here, so we pushed, and when we broke this resistance, we used it as a support level so price could continue pushing up because we broke a resistance. Now this has to be considered a floor. Immediately when we break a resistance, the level immediately has to be considered as a floor or as a support zone, because what would this cause? This would cause price to be at a low level. And when price starts pushing back up again, guys, we're going to have what? We're going to have some type of, higher point in the market. So this high here that is created is going to be some type of resistance zone. Okay. So we had a support zone here. We broke, and now we had this type of support zone here. We broke, this now became support, right? We had a support, we had a resistance. Floor is always lower than what? Ceiling. All right, so this is our ceiling. But when we broke the ceiling, this then became our support. Remember, our support is always lower than our ceiling. And immediately when we created this high, what did we also say highs were? Resistance. So this became some type of resistance level here. Price then came back to create a support. So use this resistance to create a support. And now what do we have here? If we establish that this is now our new support, and price has to be, or price is a floor and support has to be lower than the ceiling, that means if this is lower than the ceiling or has to be lower than our ceiling, this above has to be resistance. Our floor is lower than our ceiling. This is lower than our ceiling or our resistance. Okay, so that means that this will now be our new resistance zone. And as we move along price, that is what's going to continue happening, right? So when we came back up here again, right? So we came back up here again. We had this resistance, okay? We had multiple reactions at this zone, right? We had a touch here, we had a touch here. We couldn't break. We couldn't break through the resistance or the ceiling, right? We still have this as our support until price has broken our resistance. It will always stay as resistance. Once price breaks our resistance, that zone will then become support. I will write that down. Once price breaks our resistance, that zone will then become support. Okay? And the same for support. Once price breaks our support, that zone will then become resistance. Okay? That being said, guys, all right, that being said, as we continue pushing up, guys, what is this? A resistance. We broke it. So that what once was resistance will now become support. This is supporting us now. So we can look for buys here. Then what do we do here? We broke again. Okay, so since we broke again, what do we think this is gonna be? So we had the support. Then we created this high here. We couldn't break here. We came back down. Then we finally broke. Okay, the high here has to be resistance. Resistance is up above. It's the ceiling. It's high, right? It's heights. That means until we break this level, this level remains resistance. Once we break it, this then becomes support. We finally broke it here. Now this is support, right? Now the opposite, once price breaks our support, that zone will then become resistance. That being said, guys, once we break this zone here, this will now become resistance. And it makes sense because realistically, guys, we need our resistance to be a high. It has to be a high, right? Now, if we have structure here, right, we break and then we come back up to it. Once price breaks our support, that zone will become resistance. We know that if we come back up, if it fails to break, then there's some type of resistance level there. We're not breaking highs, right? So this will become resistance. Okay? And then we can continue. And because we know that resistance has to be higher than our floor or our support, we know this down here, even originally, what was resistance here has to be what? It has to be support. Because if this is our resistance, this purple zone that we are currently at, we need our support to be below us because the floor is lower than our ceiling. That's how it is. So that means as we approach this zone, this has to be our support. And it's going to be our support until we break it. And once it breaks our support, that zone will then become resistance. So this will become resistance and price will continue pushing down. So now that you guys kind of understand that concept, let me show you guys on true candles so I can show you guys some examples. All right, guys. So some people like to draw their support and resistance zones using the horizontal ray, so a line like this. Okay? That's great, but also it's a very specific line. It's a very specific point in the market. So I don't like being specific when I say, hey, traders, this is how you should box your zones. If you want to box your zones, this is exactly how you should do it. No, do what is unique to you or what makes you more comfortable, what makes it more clear to you. Some people like having their zones boxed really, really big. And some people like it having their zones boxed really, really small. I used to be like, okay, if we're at a support, go from, the bottom of the body to the wick. If you're at resistance, I would sometimes be like, okay, go from the top of the body to the wick. So top of the body of the candle to the wick. So this is the wick here. And that will be your support zone. And usually it will be at the current price action that it's currently at. So in this case, if I was over here, we have the bottom of the body. So the bottom of the body to the wick. The wick ends here. So this is going to be my support zone, right? So that's how I would usually draw my support zones. And honestly, that's a pretty valid way to do it. But even if you did it slightly smaller, it's still okay. As long as you can validate if it's a break of structure or if it's not a break of structure, you are literally okay to do whatever you want. So now that we discussed how you can draw your zones, like Again, I'm not specific, and I can only show you guys what I do. If you have been taught to draw zones a specific way and you like that way, do it, okay? But like I said, what matters most is your understanding of market structure and your understanding of what breaks the structure and what non-breaks the structure look like. If you can validate those things and if you can understand those things, you drawing your zones this thin versus this thick shouldn't matter as long as you understand structure. Okay, so I don't even want to get specifically into how you should draw your zones, but what I want you guys to understand is how we use support and resistance. So remember I said support will always be lows and resistance will always be highs, right? Support will always be lows and resistance will always be highs. Okay? So we have this. I'm just going to make them different colors so we can analyze this a little bit better. All right, and again, guys, I am just marking levels that have been touched multiple times. Okay, I want to show you guys this concept first, and then we'll go on to actually drawing specific zones. All right. So, guys, when I was saying earlier that support can become resistance and resistance can become support, this is what I mean from a candlestick perspective. Okay. That being said, the lows will always be support, the highs will always be resistance. Okay. So just to identify, we have a low here, and this is also considered a low, and this is where we're starting at. Okay. So we have a low here. Above here is what? A high. So what would that be? It's a resistance, right? That being said, until this level gets broken and price breaks through it, again, understand what a break of structure is. This zone remains resistance. But when we finally break out of it, what does this level become? It becomes support, which is also why we can buy at these higher lows, right? Because this level here is also a higher low being created, and this is also where price, tested a previous high to create a higher low in a bullish market. So it's just basically structure, right? We broke it, right? We're breaking a previous high, or we're breaking a resistance to create what? A higher low. We're breaking it to create a higher high, which then creates a higher low, basically, right? Now, what's above here? If this is our support, our new support zone now, then we know whatever is above price has to be a resistance because our support is our floor and our resistance is our ceiling. Ceiling is higher than the floor. So this is what? This is going to be resistance. And until we break this, this will always remain as resistance. Boom, we finally broke it. So what do we think this is going to be now? This will now be our newly created support, right? And then we watch for new and the next high. This is a high here. So this will be what? This will be a resistance zone, right? Until price breaks it to create what? A higher high. So if we don't break it, this zone will literally remain as resistance. And we came back down here, creating some type of level here, created a new support here anyways. And then what do we finally do? We finally break this resistance. Then what happens here? We do what? We come back and test this level, right? We come back and test this level. So what is this now? After we broke it here, right? This zone becomes what? Support, which is why we could and basically get in for buys here, right? We held here. This is now support. It's a floor, so we can buy at support because we want to buy low, sell high. We could buy here, and then boom, these highs will now become resistance. If we fail to break, then what? This is still resistance. But if we break it, it will then become what? It will then become our support zone later on. So let's see. All right, so we play it, didn't break it, so it's still resistance. This is still support. And now this is now what? our new support because we broke it, and this is now our support zone. When it comes to drawing support zones, you want to think about areas where price has touched a point or an area in the market multiple times. All right. So sometimes we'll see price action like this. We'll see it like this. We'll see it like this. We'll see it like this. And then we'll see like this, this, this. Let's just say we're like this. And then we come here. Okay. So if you were looking at this very ugly drawing, where do you see price has touched multiple times? We see price touch tier a lot, and we also see price touch tier a lot. So wouldn't it make sense that we would draw some type of support zone here, and we would draw some type of resistance zone up here? Why? Because when we see price failing to break something many times, or when we see price touching a zone multiple times or an area in the market, that usually means that zone could be potentially strong, right? So if this zone is potentially strong and we keep failing to break it, wouldn't that mean that, we possibly might push up for buys and that price or this area in the market is truly supporting price, supporting as in a floor, supporting as in support, supporting as in buys. So wouldn't it make sense that we would want to buy here because we see multiple reactions, because we see price failing to go lower than this point here, that this level should be strong and that this level might actually hold, right? And that being said, if we were looking at this resistance, wouldn't it make sense that we would want to sell at this point because we can't break past this level here and price clearly can't is not trying to or wanting to go higher? And if we're not trying or wanting to go higher, then this might be literally as high as price wants to go as of right now. This level seems to be very, very strong. And when we see these strong levels like this, and when we see price, failing to break multiple times, this can literally indicate to us that, okay, price does not want to go any higher. It does not want to go push up here. We want to stay in this level. We are respecting it. We are failing to break it. We are using it as a ceiling. Like imagine trying to punch your ceiling. It just won't budge. It won't budge. It won't budge. It won't budge until finally, you literally break your fist from punching so hard that you just give up. You just want to drop, right? So this point here would be a perfect place to do what? Get in for sells. So when you think about drawing your support and drawing your resistance zones, look for areas in the market where you see multiple reactions. And this can be on the higher time frame and even on the lower time frame. Remember, they're the same thing. It's just what? Multiple reaction or multiple candles happening on the lower time frame. That being said, guys, immediately, do you see how this is clearly a support zone here? Why is it support? We see multiple reactions happening. And like I said, guys, do not be so specific with your zones. As long as you get as much touches on your support zone as possible, do whatever you want because structure will tell you when to get in. Structure will tell you what's happening overall. And so you really don't have to rely on, oh my gosh, is my zone too thick? Is my zone too thin? No. What is overall structure truly telling you? We are respecting this previous low. We started then breaking this previous high and we started pushing up. We did fail to break this previous high here, but what does this mean? Okay, we could potentially come back down. We respected this when we came back down, beautiful. And when we came back down here, we still respecting this support zone here, right? So it really doesn't matter how thick or thin your zones are. Learn to connect the dots from a market structure standpoint, and you will be okay. So this is clearly a support zone because we're at lows. Remember, lows are going to be your support. There's multiple reactions here. And can you guys spot the resistance? Well, I see what? Multiple reactions here. And sometimes it helps drawing a high at current price and be like, okay, let me draw this high and then let me drag it to see if it's validated. Let me drag it to see if there has been multiple reactions in the past. And I see multiple reactions here. I see a reaction 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 here. This zone must be strong. This zone must be like, okay, maybe we're not strong enough to continue pushing up. We might push down for sells, right? So when we come up here, we fail to break, and then we come back down here. Beautiful, held and respected, right? And then we tried to push and break again. We couldn't. Came back down here. And then we tried to break again. And then we started creating, you know what? Bullish structure. Because again, guys, connect the dots with when you draw your support and resistance zones. Don't just think, okay, we're at resistance, let me sell, we're at support. No. What still remember the concept of what's happening overall. We are respecting, these previous lows here, creating a higher low. Then we started breaking previous highs, and we're doing exactly what bullish structure wants. It is breaking highs and respecting lows, so we're still in bullish structure, right? We're still overall bullish. It just couldn't break past this resistance, which seemed to be super, super strong. So every time it tried to, break past this resistance, it came back down to these lows to see, okay, can we finally, use these lows as strength or as power to finally be able to break through these zones, right? And it finally, at this point here, it gained that strength. And now you're just watching structure. And now because we broke it, what does this zone become? It becomes support. And I know this, this when it did break here, it didn't test it beautifully, like as in maybe like right here. It came slightly lower. And that's okay, guys, because what did I teach you? How are we respecting overall structure? You're not just looking at the highs breaking, you're also looking at what? You're also paying attention to the lows. You're also paying attention to see, are we respecting these lows down here? And then to see, okay, after we held here again, can we finally break these previous highs? And then we started just making structure nicely. It just started flowing. And that is literally how people get in for, off support and resistance. They just draw zones where price has reacted multiple times. What a lot of people miss out on when it comes to support and resistance is they just forget about the structure behind the price movements. They're so focused on, okay, let me buy at support, let me sell at resistance, that they forget to acknowledge what's actually happening. So even if you draw your zones, please remember to always pay attention to structure. And this can also, be done on the lower time frame. So if you don't want to draw your zones on the higher time frame like this, you can you can 110%, you know, draw more zones on the lower time frame like this, right? You can draw it like this, you can draw it like this, and boom, right? It's the same thing. And this is where the concept of major zones and minor zones derive from. Your major zones are going to be what are going to be your higher time frame levels, right? That's why it's called major because higher time frames are always going to be stronger than the lower time frame because it's from a larger perspective. Whereas, the lower time frame is a smaller perspective. It's a lot of price candles, it's a lot of price action happening in the markets. So that being said, if you were to, let's just say draw your support here and then draw your resistance zone here, because we're at a high, let's just say, in between it on the lower time frame, let's just go from here. Let's just go from here is literally going to be your minor zones. So when I think about minor zones, I like to think of it as anything from the 1 hour and lower. Major zones, I like to think about them as the 4 hour and anything higher. Okay, so if we go onto the 1 hour, we can derive minor zones, and minor zones are honestly just going to be your zones in between your zones. And again, this is so too thick for me, so what am I going to do? Decrease it. Just because I draw it once on the higher time frame does not mean I have to keep it perfectly on the lower time frame. And your minor zones are just going to be these smaller candles or these smaller price movements in between your major support and resistance zone. So that being said, if I could draw my another zone here, I could draw another zone here. And realistically, these are now going to be considered as your minor zones because they were found on what? The lower time frame. Yeah, I'm gonna make this green. All right, so we have a minor zone here, minor zone here, And we also have a minor zone here. So if you don't want to wait for to buy and sell at these major zones that we just established, again, this is going to be our major support or re major resistance. This is going to be our major support, right? So if you don't want to buy at if you don't want to wait for price to tap into our major zones like our major support and our major resistance, you can get in where price is at these minor zones, right? You can wait for a break and then a retest here. You can wait for a break and then a retest here. You can wait for a break and then a retest here. And then because we're at our major zone, you can just wait for a break of the zone here and then a retest here. Okay? Or if you know price is failing to break and we get a break of, lows, maybe you can wait for a break and retest here, a break and a retest here, a break and a retest here, and so on and so on. Okay? That being said, guys, that is how you do major support and major resistance zone. It does not have to be complicated. You can draw your major zones on the 4 hour, then go onto the 30 or even the 15 minute for your minor zones, right? You could even start them on the 2 hour and draw your minor zones on the 15 and the 5. It really just depends on how you want to do it, on how you see the markets and what makes more sense and what's clear to your head and your mind. Okay? So, but the essential thing to understand when it comes to support and resistance, support is where you buy at, resistance is where you sell at. Okay? And remember, support can become resistance and resistance can become support. And it's always essential to make sure that that support is at the lows and that resistance is at the highs. Let me quickly do another example. So I'm going to go at a random point in the market. Okay, let's just go here. All right, let's draw some major zones. I'm going to go on the 2 hour for today. Okay, so this is going to be my major zone time frame. Where do I see multiple reactions happening? First thing you can do to identify support, find a low. I have a low here, right? Then what do I want to do? Validate it. So look left. There was a touch here. Yep, there was reaction here. And there's even a reaction here. So this zone is now validated. If you want to keep it all the way left here, you can. But if you're like, okay, I've validated it enough, I'm okay with leaving it up until here. Feel free to do that. Feel free, right? Now you want a resistance zone. Your resistance zone is always going to be a high, right? That being said, I like this high here. I like these highs here. Let's just say I want to do these highs here. Let's validate this resistance. Okay, look left. Have we gotten reactions in the past before? Okay, we have one here, one here, one here, and we even had price break to the downside and become what? Resistance later on over here, right? So this is a good reaction point. So this is going to be my major support and my resistance zone, which is my purple zones. Now I can drop down into the lower time frame, so like the 30 or even the 15 minute, and draw my minor zones. Mark, okay, I'm going to mark these levels here. So what was once what? What was once support here? So this was resistance. So our support has to be lower. So this would be our support. When it broke, it became what? Resistance over here, right? So we had multiple reactions happening. So if I saw these highs here, I could have dragged it left and would have saw, okay, we had a reaction here, 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 and here. So this might be a good minor zone. So then I can, make it green, make it a different color, and be like, okay, if we hold here, we know we're gonna sell. And then we can, drag it even more, and we see more reactions over here. And let's just say I like, the zones up here. All right, then we do the same thing. And this is how people can get into the market just by this. But if you compare this with more knowledge on market structure, this is gonna be way more easier to actually really see. So we came here, we failed to break structure, so we tried to go up, create a lower high. So what? We're still in bearish market. Then we tried to break again here. We didn't, but then we came back up here. Finally broke this level. This is our major support zone, right? And this is what? Our what? Minor resistance zone or our resistance zone. Yep, that it tested here, right? If it fails to break here, we could potentially see price coming lower and then we can go from there. But this is how you can draw your support and resistance zones or your zones in general when you are looking at price to see, are we breaking structure or are we respecting structure? and then this can help you derive entry confirmations to get in for buys and sells. If you can draw your zones and if you can draw areas where price is, strong and weak, this might help you find good buy opportunities and sell opportunities in the market. So you guys see even this, right? We have a good support. We're failing to break it multiple times. Failed to break here, right? Then we tried to break this resistance, couldn't, but when it came down, it had these equal lows here. So this support zone is clearly strong. And then finally, we could have gotten in for buys, and price finally did what? Broke those previous highs and then continued pushing up. Even if you got in for buys here, when we saw price come back down here and it still didn't break the low and we're still respecting our support, that is strong confirmation that we're gonna, continue pushing up. Then what did we do? When we came here, this resistance, we broke this resistance, came and tested here, we could have gotten for another buy. Okay, broke this resistance again. Remember, this became support after we broke it. Okay, broke this resistance again, right? And then we could have gotten on a retest in this area again. And then we did what? Came pushed back up here and then broke this, resistance and then price came back down. And then, you could have potentially got in for buys again. But you can easily just draw these zones and pair this with market structure to get in for great entries. And also, you can help your understanding to see if zones are strong and weak just by seeing how many touches we occur at the zone and how price moves and reacts at those levels. So this is how you can actually draw your support and resistance zones. I hope this was easy and simple for you guys. Honestly, do not overcomplicate it. So that being said, guys, this is the end of this video.